It was a sunny day in western Portland, Oregon. The Garrison home stood out among the other buildings in the Arlington Heights neighborhood, a modernist structure with panoramic windows and open terraces, designed by the homeowner himself. Luke Garrison, a 45-year-old architect, had purchased the hillside lot 10 years earlier and transformed it into a model of contemporary architectural thought. On Sunday morning, Luke and his wife Marianne hosted guests for brunch, a tradition they started shortly after moving in. Marianne, a 42-year-old psychotherapist with a private practice at a prestigious medical center, was renowned for her ability to create an atmosphere of relaxed conversation. Her hazel eyes watched the guests attentively as she filled their glasses with mimosa. "I always tell my patients that social connections are the foundation of mental health," Marianne said, addressing the small group of guests gathered around the Italian marble kitchen island. "Luke and I try to practice what I preach." Luke, a tall man with prematurely graying temples, smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He mechanically reached for his wrist, where he usually wore a watch, but today it was empty. Speaking of Luke, Samantha Crawford, owner of a chain of popular restaurants and a longtime friend of Marianne's since college, interjected, "Everyone is already talking about your new project. Tell us more." Samantha, an energetic woman with short dark hair, had a straightforwardness that endeared her to people. Her restaurant business thrived thanks to her ability to create spaces where visitors felt both comfortable and immersed in a special atmosphere. Luke took a sip from his glass and set it on the table. "The Portland Revival Project is the most ambitious of my career. We are going to transform an old industrial area into an eco-friendly, multifunctional complex that will become the new heart of the city." "Sounds impressive," remarked one of the guests. "It's not just a redevelopment," Luke continued. "We are preserving the historical value of the neighborhoods while integrating modern technology. Green roofs, rainwater harvesting systems, solar panels, and all of this in an aesthetic that respects the industrial past of the area." "What about the social aspect?" Samantha asked. "There's been so much talk about gentrification lately." Marianne glanced quickly at her husband. This topic had always been a point of contention between them. "The city council insists on including affordable housing," Luke said, his voice becoming slightly tense. 20% of the living space will be allocated for affordable housing programs." "Only 20%? Samantha raised an eyebrow. "Rebecca, the planning department insisted on 15%, Luke replied, his gaze lingering briefly on the window. "We raised the bar." Mariana, noticing her husband's reservation, walked over to him and put her hand on his shoulder, a gesture that looked like a show of support to outsiders, but to them, both had a hint of control. "Luke is working with Rebecca Foster," she explained to the guests. "She's the city's lead planner, a very dedicated woman." Samantha, who had known Marianne long enough to pick up on the nuances of her tone, gave her friend a questioning look. Marianne shook her head slightly. This was not a conversation for the general public. "The project should be completed in 3 years," Luke continued, pulling away from his wife's touch. "If everything goes according to plan. If the permits are obtained on time," Marianne added with a strained smile. "Bureaucracy sometimes delays things." "That won't be a problem," Luke replied, a little more sharply than necessary. "We have an excellent relationship with the administration." When the last guests had left, Luke lingered on the terrace, looking out over the city below. Marianne joined him, handing him a glass of water. "Did you take your medicine?" she asked. "Stop babysitting me," Luke replied wearily. "I didn't forget. The doctor said regularity is critical." "I know what the doctor said. I was there." They stood side by side, looking at the same landscape, but seeing different cities. "You mentioned her name today," Marianne finally said. "Rebecca. I work with her. It's normal to mention colleagues." "It's not that you mentioned her, it's how you did it." Luke turned to his wife. "What do you want to hear, Marianne? That I spend more time with her than with you? It's true. She's my life's project." "It's always about your projects," she replied quietly. "There was a time when I was your life's project." "That's not fair." "Maybe." Marianne took his empty glass. "Samantha suggested we meet up this week. Dinner at her new restaurant. I'll be busy. Presentation for investors." "I didn't say which day." Luke rubbed his nose. "It doesn't matter. It's going to be crazy all week. Just like last week, and the week before that." The next day, Luke held his morning meeting at his architecture firm's office, located in a restored historic building in downtown Portland. The conference room overlooking the Willamette River was filled with members of the project team, architects, engineers, and consultants. "We have to submit the final master plan in 2 weeks," Luke said, moving between the projection screens. "The city council is insisting on increasing the amount of public space at the expense of commercial space. That will reduce profitability," remarked the CFO. "Investors will be unhappy." "I know," Luke replied, "but without the council's approval, we can't move forward." At that moment, the door opened and Rebecca Foster entered the room, a tall woman with a confident gait and piercing blue eyes. Despite her strict business suit, she exuded an almost predatory energy. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, taking a seat next to Luke. "The morning meeting at City Hall ran late." Luke nodded, trying not to show how the atmosphere in the room had changed with her arrival. "We were just discussing the council's requirements." "I have good news," Rebecca said, opening her laptop. "I've had preliminary talks with the members of the Planning Commission. They are willing to compromise on the ratio of public to commercial space if we increase the percentage of affordable housing to 25%. A murmur rippled through the conference room. "That's higher than we discussed," Luke remarked. "The political climate is changing," Rebecca shrugged. "The elections are just around the corner. The council members need victories in the social sphere. And we need a working business plan," objected the CFO. Luke raised his hand, stopping the beginning argument. "Let's consider the options. Rebecca, could you stay after the meeting? We need to discuss our negotiation strategy." Rebecca met his gaze and smiled slightly. "Of course, I have a few ideas." That evening, Marianne sat in a cozy cafe near her office. Across from her, Samantha stirred her tea, listening intently to her friend. "I don't know what's going on," Marianne said. "He seems to be drifting away every day, even before the doctors made the diagnosis." "Have you tried talking to him?" "Endlessly. He either brushes it off or changes the subject to the project." "What's the diagnosis? You didn't say." "Early-stage Parkinson's," Marianne replied quietly. "The symptoms are mild so far, but progression is inevitable." "My God!" Samantha put her hand on her friend's palm. "I'm so sorry." "The doctors say that modern treatments can slow the progression significantly. But Luke, he's trying to cram his whole life into a short period of time. This project consumes him entirely." "What about you?" Marianne smiled weakly. "I'm a psychotherapist. We're the worst patients. We analyze everything all the time instead of just feeling." "And what are you analyzing?" "I think the problems in our marriage started long before the diagnosis. We just ignored them, busy with our careers, our social lives." "Maintaining the perfect facade?" Samantha suggested gently. Marianne nodded. "I help people figure out their relationships, but I can't see my own clearly. Professional blindness." "Do you think there's someone else?" Marianne stared out the window for a long time before answering. "I don't know, but I feel like I'm losing him. And it's not just the illness." Luke Garrison stayed late at the office, as he often had in recent months. The spacious room was empty, except for the long shadows cast by the desk lamps and the muffled hum of the ventilation system. Scale models of buildings surrounded his desk, a miniature city in which he was the absolute creator. "You're not answering your phone again." Rebecca Foster appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Sorry, I turned off the ringer. I was trying to concentrate." She crossed the room, her heels tapping on the wooden floor like a steady metronome. Placing one cup in front of Luke, Rebecca leaned over the model. Change the configuration of the public square? Yes, I increased the green space. I'm sacrificing part of the parking lot. The jury will like that, she said, running her finger over the miniature sculpture in the center of the square. Especially Thompson from the Environmental Committee. Luke picked up his coffee and took a sip. Black, no sugar. You remember? I noticed details. A professional habit. Rebecca sat down on the edge of the table, too close to him. Like the fact that you missed your medication. Your hand is shaking. Luke clenched his fingers mechanically. It's nothing serious. How serious is it? Not serious enough to interfere with the project. I'm not asking about the project. Their eyes met, and for a moment the office seemed to disappear, leaving only the tense space between them. It's early stages. With medication you can live normally for years, he finally replied, looking away. What about Marianne? What about Marianne? How is she coping? Luke stood up and walked over to the window. She's a psychotherapist. She's coping professionally. That's not an answer. We've been living parallel lives for a long time. The diagnosis just made it more obvious. Rebecca stood up and walked over to him. I'm sorry. I shouldn't pry into your personal life. Aren't we already doing that? Luke asked, turning to her. She placed her hand on his chest, a gesture that balanced between professional support and something much more personal. It's complicated. Complicated, Luke echoed, covering her hand with his. At the same time, Marianne sat in her home office, reviewing the bills spread out on her desk. Her neat notes contrasted with Luke's chaotic scribbles. The computer screen cast a bluish light on her face, emphasizing the shadows under her eyes from a sleepless night. The credit card statement for the past month puzzled her. 3 large transactions at the Azure restaurant that Luke hadn't mentioned. The restaurant was known for its secluded atmosphere and high prices, the perfect place for business meetings or dates. Marianne opened her browser and typed in the name of the restaurant. In one of the photo galleries, she saw a report from a charity evening organized by the city administration. In the background of one of the photos was Luke leaning toward Rebecca Foster, his hand on her waist, in a gesture that could not be interpreted as purely business. With trembling fingers, Marianne picked up the phone. Samantha, are you busy? I need someone to talk to. An hour later, they met at a small bar in the Pearl District. Muted jazz and warm lighting created the illusion of an intimate space in the middle of a bustling city. I don't want to believe the obvious, Marianne said, twirling her wine glass without drinking. Maybe I'm imagining things. Samantha listened attentively, without interrupting. Her restaurant experience had made her an excellent listener. And it's not just the photos, Marianne continued. Something has changed. He's pulling away. Even when he's physically close, it's as if he's mentally somewhere else. Have you asked him directly? No. I'm afraid to hear the answer. He may not even realize what he's doing, Samantha suggested cautiously. People react differently to news of illness. It's not about the illness, Marianne shook her head. The problem started earlier. It's just that now I have a convenient explanation for his absence. Of course, dear. I'm staying late because of the project. I have to get it done while my health allows. What else is bothering you? Marianne looked around, as if afraid they might be overheard. Money. Our savings are dwindling, and Luke avoids talking about it. I found a notice about a second mortgage on the house. He took it out without my knowledge. Is that even legal? Probably not. But that's not all. He started getting calls, after which he would lock himself in his office. Once I overheard part of a conversation. He was talking about some shares and solving the problem with the inspector. Samantha frowned. That sounds strange. I've counseled enough couples to know that financial secrets usually hide deeper secrets. Do you think he's involved in something illegal? I don't know. Marianne finally took a sip of wine. But the Portland Revival Project involves huge amounts of money, major investors, and political interests. And Luke has never been particularly flexible when it comes to ethical issues. What about Rebecca Foster? What do you know about her? Officially, she's a Princeton graduate with a brilliant career, a consultant to the City Council on urban planning. I found an article about her in a professional journal. A visionary with political ambitions is how they describe her. Are you jealous? Marianne smiled bitterly. I'm afraid. Not that she'll take my husband, but that she already has. That our marriage is just a facade that we maintain out of inertia. On the other side of town, in the City Hall office, a closed meeting of the Planning Commission was taking place. Luke presented the revised project plan, skillfully hiding the tremor in his right hand. We have taken into account all the recommendations of the Environmental Committee, he said, pointing to the diagrams and charts. We have increased the green areas and added a rainwater collection and purification system. What about the historical and cultural heritage? Asked a woman from the Monument Preservation Committee. The facades of 4 buildings in the neighborhood are of historical value. We are preserving and restoring all the facades, Luke assured her. The internal structure will be modernized, but the exterior will remain authentic. And the cost? Asked a gray-haired man representing the Budget Committee. The latest estimates exceed the original budget by 30%. Rebecca, sitting next to Luke, spoke up. We have found additional investors. Green Tech Investments is willing to allocate significant funds in exchange for priority in locating its headquarters in the new complex. Green Tech? The Budget Committee representative asked. Aren't they associated with Councilman Richardson? Advisor Richardson is one of the biggest supporters of environmental initiatives, Rebecca replied evasively. Naturally, he has contacts in the industry. After the meeting, Luke and Rebecca were left alone in the conference room. That was close, Luke said quietly. The question about Green Tech. Richardson will take care of it, Rebecca replied calmly. He has a majority on the board. What if the journalists dig deeper? They won't. The press will be distracted by the fight for affordable housing. Activists are already planning protests. Luke rubbed his temples. We're going too far. Rebecca moved closer. We're just speeding up processes that would have happened anyway. The project will benefit the city. And the fact that some people will profit more than others, well, that's just the way the world works. What if everything comes out? It won't. Rebecca put her hand on his shoulder. Trust me, this isn't the first project I've steered through these waters. Pause. Their eyes met. You're shaking again, she remarked. Luke tried to hide his hand, but Rebecca caught it. Don't. Not from me. The doctor says it's progressing faster than expected. Are there other treatments? Experimental ones? There are clinical trials in Europe, but it's expensive. How expensive? Hundreds of thousands. Insurance doesn't cover it. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. We'll figure something out. We? You're not alone in this, Luke. She squeezed his hand tighter. Returning home late in the evening, Luke found Marianne in the living room. She was sitting in the dark, only the dim light of the street lamps filtering through the panoramic windows. Aren't you turning on the lights? He asked, stopping in the doorway. I like looking at the city at night, Marianne replied without turning around. All the lights, all the lives, every window is someone's story. Poetic. Professional deformation. I always think about the people behind the facades. Luke walked over and sat down in the chair opposite her. Were you waiting for me? No. Her voice sounded distant. Just thinking. About what? About how everything has its price. Marianne finally looked at him. And sometimes that price isn't expressed in money. Luke flinched, as if her words had touched something deep inside him. Marianne. I saw the statements, she interrupted, and the photos from the charity event. A heavy silence hung in the room. It's not what you think, Luke finally said. What do you think, Luke? You don't even know what's been going on in my head for the last few months. The project requires my full commitment. Always the project. Marianne smiled bitterly. What about us? Our marriage. It also requires complete dedication. I'm doing this for us, Luke said, standing up and walking over to the window. For our future. What future, Luke? Her voice trembled. The one where we live in a beautiful house with a beautiful view, but are complete strangers to each other? Or the one where you hide your financial problems from me and take out loans behind my back? Luke turned to her. Have you been going through my papers? I'm your wife. I have a right to know what's going on with our finances. Everything's under control. No, it's not. You lie to me. You dodge me. You avoid talking. What's going on, Luke? What have you gotten yourself into? He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that betrayed his nervousness. It's hard to explain. Try. We have all night. Marianne crossed her arms over her chest. The project is bigger than it seems. There are nuances. Nuances? Is that what you call your affair with Rebecca Foster now? There's nothing between me and Rebecca, he replied too quickly. Don't insult my intelligence, Luke. Marianne stood up. I've seen the way you look at her, the way you talk about her. I'm a psychotherapist, remember? I've been reading people for years. Then read this. I'm doing everything I can to secure our future, especially now, with my diagnosis. His right hand began to shake noticeably, and he clenched it into a fist. Have you taken your medication today? Marianne asked, her tone instantly changing from accusatory to concerned. Don't change the subject. It's not a change of subject. It's concern for you. Luke laughed, dryly, without amusement. Concern. Of course. Professional concern as a therapist. What does that mean? When was the last time you cared about me as a wife, not as a mental health professional? Marianne recoiled as if he had hit her. That's not fair. Life is unfair. Luke headed for the door. Ask your God or the universe why a man with my ambitions gets a diagnosis that will take away control of my own body. Luke, please. I'll be in my office. I need to prepare for tomorrow's meeting. When he left, Marianne sank into a chair and allowed the tears she had been holding back all evening to finally flow freely. A few minutes later, she picked up her phone and texted Samantha. You were right. It's much worse than I thought. Monday morning began for Luke with another bout of tremors. His hand shook so badly that he couldn't hold his toothbrush. In the Italian marble bathroom, the sound of the falling object echoed. Luke looked at himself in the mirror, his face gaunt, new wrinkles around his eyes. The disease was taking away not only control of his body, but also his self-confidence, the foundation of his entire professional and personal life. Marianne heard the sound from the bedroom, but didn't go to check. Over the past few weeks, the distance between them had grown into a canyon, too wide to try to bridge. She got dressed and gathered her documents into her briefcase, preparing for the workday. The traces of her recent conversation with her husband still lingered as a painful lump in her chest, but years of professional practice had taught her to separate her personal feelings from her work responsibilities. They bumped into each other in the kitchen. Luke was trying to make coffee, but his movements were clumsy. I'll help, said Marianne, reaching for the coffee machine. No, don't, he replied sharply. I'm not disabled yet. I'm not. She stopped, not finishing her sentence. There was no point in starting the day with another conflict. Breakfast passed in an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the clatter of cutlery against plates. Finally, Marianne got up. I have a late appointment today. I'll be back after 8. Luke nodded without looking up from his cup. Only when the door closed behind his wife did he allow himself to exhale. His phone vibrated. A message from Rebecca. Urgent. Need to meet. Problems with the project. At Luke's architectural firm, news awaited him that would turn his perception of the project, which had become his life's work, upside down. Jason Morrow, a young engineer from his team, shifted nervously from foot to foot as he handed him a folder of documents. I checked the load calculations for the east wing, he said, pointing to the diagrams. The numbers don't add up. The materials specified in the specifications do not match those delivered to the construction site. What does that mean? Someone has replaced the high-quality concrete with a cheaper alternative. The difference in strength is critical. The structure will not withstand seismic activity. Are you sure? Absolutely. I double-checked. And that's not the only violation. The steel beams are 15% thinner than specified in the design, and the insulation materials do not meet environmental standards. Luke leaned back in his chair, feeling the ground slip away from under his feet. Someone is cutting corners on safety. Who signed the latest amendments to the estimate? That's the strangest part. Jason opened the last page. Your signature is here, but according to the date, you weren't in the office that day. You were at a conference in Seattle. Luke took the document with a trembling hand. The signature did look like his, but he had never signed these changes. Who else has seen these documents? Only me, and possibly the finance department. Don't show them to anyone else. I'll take care of it. After Jason left, Luke sat for a long time, staring at the documents. The picture was coming together, piece by piece. Forged signatures, cheap materials, millions disappearing from the project budget. He reached for the phone to call Rebecca, but stopped. What if she was involved too? The meeting took place not in the office, but in a park by the river. The autumn wind blew fallen leaves across the paths, and heavy clouds covered the sky. Nature seemed to sense the approaching storm. What's wrong? Rebecca asked, sitting down next to Luke on the bench. Who forged my signature on the material replacement documents? He handed her the folder without wasting time on preliminaries. Rebecca leafed through the papers, her face remaining impassive. I don't know, but it looks bad. Bad? It's a disaster. The building will be unsafe, and my reputation. Your reputation is fine. No one will find out. I found out. Luke turned to her. And I'm not going to be a part of this. Tomorrow, I'm sending a letter to the regulatory authorities. Rebecca placed her hand on his palm, a gesture that used to be soothing, but now only provoked disgust. Luke, think about it. Too many people are involved. Too much money. I don't care. What about your future? Your treatment? Her voice softened. Those experimental techniques in Europe, they're not free. Are you suggesting I turn a blind eye to fraud in exchange for money? I'm suggesting you survive. Rebecca squeezed his hand tighter. Counselor Richardson said he could help you get into a clinic in Zurich. They have a new stem cell treatment program for Parkinson's. The results are amazing. How noble of him. Luke pulled his hand away. And what's the price? You just overlook a few inaccuracies in the paperwork. That's all. What if the building collapses? What if people die? The building won't collapse, Rebecca snapped. Yes, the materials are cheaper, but they're still within acceptable standards. The difference will go toward administrative needs. Toward bribes and kickbacks, Luke translated. Rebecca didn't deny it. That's how the world works. Projects of this scale can't be done without compromises. That's not a compromise. That's a crime. She stood up, her face suddenly cold and distant. Think carefully, Luke. You're not the only one with something to lose. Marianne has a successful practice, a reputation. What if certain details about her relationships with her patients come to light, especially with that young man who became so attached to her last year? Luke stood up too. Are you threatening my wife? I'm just reminding you of reality. Everyone has vulnerabilities. Stay away from her. That's up to you. Rebecca turned to leave, but paused. You have a day to think about it. Then events will unfold without your involvement. On his way home, Luke felt his body not obeying him. His right leg refused to bend normally, so he had to call a taxi instead of walking to his car. He realized that the disease was progressing faster than the doctors had predicted. Time was slipping through his fingers. At home, Luke went straight to his study and took out a worn notebook. It was an old-fashioned way of storing information, but now he needed something autonomous, inaccessible to electronic hacking. He began to write down everything he knew about the Portland Revival Project: names, amounts, dates, copies of documents. It was a kind of insurance in case something happened to him. When Marianne returned home, she found her husband still in his study. He looked exhausted, his face gaunt, and there were coffee stains on his shirt. "Are you okay?" she asked, pausing in the doorway. Luke looked up, as if only now noticing her presence. "No, but I will be soon." "Have you taken your medication?" "It's not helping anymore," he said, closing his notebook. "Marianne, we need to talk about a lot of things." She entered the study and sat down opposite him. "I'm listening." "I've made mistakes, many mistakes." Luke ran his hand over his face. "And not just in our marriage. I had a feeling. It's more serious than you think. Something criminal is going on with the project. Document forgery, material substitution, money laundering, and I'm at the center of it all." Marianne looked closely at her husband. Her professional skills allowed her to see that he was telling the truth. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm being threatened. And not just me, but you too." Luke took a flash drive out of the desk drawer. "Here are copies of all the documents I've collected. If something happens to me..." "What do you mean, happens?" "Luke, you're scaring me." "I'm scared myself," he admitted. "I don't know what they're capable of, but I know I can't be a part of this anymore. You need to go to the police. Tomorrow. I've got everything ready." Marianne put her hand on his arm, the first sincere gesture of support between them in a long time. "I'm with you, no matter what happens." During the night, Luke woke up with a sharp pain in his chest. He tried to get up, but his body wouldn't obey him. Marianne was sleeping next to him, her breathing steady and calm. Luke wanted to call for help, but his voice wouldn't obey him. The room swam before his eyes, and his last thought was regret that he hadn't had time to fix everything. Marianne woke up in the morning to silence. Usually Luke was already up, and the sound of the coffee machine could be heard from the kitchen. She turned and saw her husband lying motionless beside her. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but his skin had taken on a grayish hue. Marianne knew what she was seeing, but her brain refused to accept it. Her hand trembled as she checked for a pulse, which was not there. The call to the ambulance, the arrival of the paramedics, the official pronouncement of death, it all happened as if in a fog. "Extensive stroke," the doctor explained. "Probably a complication of an underlying condition. We sympathize with your loss." Marianne sat in the living room as Luke's body was taken away. Samantha arrived half an hour after the call, brought food that no one was going to eat, and just sat there, not trying to comfort her with empty words. "He knew he was dying," Marianne finally said. "Last night he was talking about some documents, about corruption in his project. He gave me a flash drive. Have you looked at it?" "Not yet. I can't right now." Marianne's phone rang. It was Luke's office number. She answered, listened silently, then hung up. "It's Luke's secretary. She says Rebecca Foster has taken charge of everything related to the funeral. She's already contacted the funeral home." "Are you okay with that?" Samantha asked cautiously. "I don't care." Marianne stared into space. "I don't feel anything. It's like I'm numb. It's shock. It's a normal reaction." "I'm a psychotherapist, Samantha. I know it's shock," she said, standing up and walking over to the window. "You know what's strange? I can't figure out what exactly I'm mourning. The husband I once loved, or the chance to never know what our relationship could have been if we had tried to save it." Across town, Rebecca Foster was sitting in her office when she received the news of Luke's death. Her face twisted in pain for a moment, but she quickly regained control. Putting her phone aside, she opened her laptop and began typing an email to Advisor Richardson. "Unforeseen circumstances. L is no longer a factor. Proceed with Plan B." Preparations for the funeral proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Rebecca took charge of contacting Luke's colleagues and business partners, many of whom expressed sincere grief. The Portland Revival project was temporarily suspended out of respect, But it was clear to everyone that the work would continue. Too much money and too many interests were involved. Marianne spent her days in a strange stupor. She met with lawyers, signed documents, and accepted condolences, but it all seemed to be happening to someone else. Her only anchor to reality was Samantha, who had practically moved in with her, making sure her friend ate and slept. On the evening before the funeral, Marianne finally found the strength to open the flash drive Luke had given her. There were hundreds of documents, contracts, financial reports, photographs, recordings of conversations. It was a story of corruption and manipulation, at the center of which was the Portland Revival Project. The names of Richardson, the CEO of Green Tech Investments, and Rebecca Foster appeared in almost every file. "My God," Marianne whispered as she looked through the evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud. This is what he was trying to stop. After saving a copy of the documents to another drive, she hid it in her office. She decided to take the original with her to the funeral. Someone had to answer for what had happened to Luke, for the threats against him, for the pressure he had been under in the last weeks of his life. The night before the funeral, Marianne dreamed of Luke. He was standing at their bedroom window, looking out at the city, his silhouette clearly outlined against the night sky. "Be careful," he said without turning around. "They won't stop." Riverside Cemetery in Portland was bathed in autumn gold. A cool wind blew fallen leaves between the gravestones, creating the impression that nature itself was participating in the mourning. Dozens of people gathered around the freshly dug grave: colleagues, business partners, friends of the Harrison family. Two women stood out among them, standing on either side of the coffin: Marianne, the widow, in a simple black dress, and Rebecca Foster, in an elegant dark gray suit, standing slightly apart but clearly occupying a privileged position among the mourners. Marianne, pale and with a frozen expression on her face, seemed to be somewhere far away from what was happening. Next to her stood Samantha Crawford, holding her friend's arm and watching the crowd intently. Marianne's small handbag, containing the flash drive with the explosive documents, weighed heavily on her shoulder, a physical reminder of the burden of truth she now carried. The priest was finishing his eulogy when Rebecca stepped forward to say her farewell. Her well-modulated voice carried across the cemetery, telling of the architectural genius lost to the world, of his vision for a renewed Portland, of the legacy he left behind. "Luke Garrison saw beauty where others saw only destruction," she said, skillfully masking her emotions. "He dreamed of a city where history and the future would intertwine in harmonious unity. We, his colleagues, vow to bring his vision to life so that his memory lives on in the stone and glass of the new Portland." Marianne listened to this speech with growing inner tension. Every word Rebecca said sounded like a lie to her. She knew the truth about the vision and the legacy. When the ceremony came to an end and people began to disperse, Marianne decided to act. Intercepting Rebecca at the cemetery exit, she said quietly, "We need to talk about Luke's documents." Rebecca's face momentarily lost its professional expression of grief. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "I think you understand perfectly well. Counselor Richardson, Green Tech Investments, forged signatures." Rebecca looked around to make sure no one was listening to their conversation. "Not here. Meet me in my car in 5 minutes." Marianne nodded and headed over to Samantha to tell her she would be late. She didn't notice Rebecca walking behind the trees, taking out her phone and hurriedly typing a message. Rebecca's black Lexus was parked in the far corner of the parking lot, half hidden by thick bushes. Marianne walked to the car, checking that the flash drive was still in her purse. Opening the door, she sat down in the passenger seat. She didn't even have time to turn around when a deafening shot rang out. The first bullet hit Marianne in the chest, the second in the neck. Rebecca, holding the silenced pistol with both hands, fired a third shot, a control shot to the head. It all happened in a matter of seconds, without a word. Throwing off her black gloves and putting them in her pocket, Rebecca quickly searched Marianne's purse, found a flash drive, and took it. Getting out of the car on the opposite side, she quickly headed for the service exit of the cemetery, where a taxi she had called in advance was waiting for her. The body was discovered 20 minutes later when Samantha, concerned about her friend's long absence, began searching for her. Her scream attracted the attention of security guards and the remaining visitors. The police cordoned off the crime scene, and television stations were already broadcasting breaking news. Shocking murder at a funeral in Portland. Widow of renowned architect shot dead in her own car. Detective Marcus Jenkins arrived at the scene 40 minutes after the body was discovered. Tall, with a tired face and attentive eyes, he moved methodically and economically, as if conserving energy for a long marathon of investigation. 15 years in the Portland Police Homicide Division had taught him that the most brutal crimes are often hidden behind facades of prosperity. After examining the body and the crime scene, Jenkins made his first conclusions. A professional execution, a premeditated murder. 3 shots at close range, no struggle, valuables stolen from the victim's purse. Classic signs of a contract killing disguised as a robbery. "What about the surveillance cameras?" he asked the young officer collecting technical evidence. "Only at the main entrance, detective. This part of the parking lot isn't covered." "Any witnesses?" "No one has come forward yet. Most people had already left by the time the body was discovered." Jenkins nodded and looked at the woman sitting in the police car, covered with a blanket. Samantha Crawford, a restaurateur and close friend of the victim, looked devastated, but maintained unexpected composure. "Miss Crawford," Jenkins began, sitting down next to her. "I understand this is a difficult time, but I need to ask you a few questions." "Of course, detective," her voice hoarse with tears. "I want to help." "Did you notice anything unusual before Mrs. Garrison disappeared?" "She was talking to Rebecca Foster after the ceremony. She said she would be a few minutes late." "Rebecca Foster, her husband's colleague?" "The city planner. They were working together on the downtown redevelopment project." Samantha paused. "And they were having an affair." Jenkins's eyebrows rose slightly, the first sign of interest. "Are you sure?" Marianne knew. Luke didn't really hide it, especially in the last few months. "How long had they been involved?" "I can't say for sure, but at least 6 months." Jenkins made a note in his notebook. "Anything else that might be important? Did Marianne mention anything unusual lately?" Samantha thought for a moment. The night before the funeral, she mentioned some documents. She said Luke had left her evidence of corruption in the Portland Revival project, on a flash drive. "Where is that drive now?" "She said she took it with her today, in her purse." Jenkins immediately contacted the forensic team that had examined the car. The purse was found on the floor by the passenger seat, but the flash drive was not in it. Her wallet with credit cards and cash was also missing, which confirmed the robbery theory. Over the next 48 hours, Jenkins conducted a series of interviews. Rebecca Foster claimed that she left the cemetery immediately after the ceremony, citing an urgent meeting at City Hall. Her secretary confirmed this version of events, but there was still a 30-minute gap in her alibi, enough time to commit murder. "Did Marianne suspect you of having an affair with her husband?" Jenkins asked during their second meeting at the police station. "Perhaps." Rebecca looked impeccable in her dark blue suit, her voice confident. "But I had no relationship with Luke Garrison. We were colleagues working on an important project. Rumors are inevitable in such situations. We have witnesses who claim otherwise." "Witnesses to gossip, detective, not facts." "What about the Portland Revival project? Are there any violations or corruption schemes that Luke Garrison might have known about?" A slight shadow passed over Rebecca's face. "That's absurd. The project undergoes all the necessary checks and audits. Luke was a perfectionist. He would never have allowed any violations. And yet, before he died, he gave his wife some documents that disappeared along with her killer. I can't comment on something I know nothing about, detective." Jenkins decided to approach it from a different angle. After going through Luke and Mariana Harrison's financial records, he discovered an alarming picture: large loans, a second mortgage, mysterious payments to offshore accounts. At the same time, while studying the business connections of the Portland Revival Project, he found some suspicious coincidences. Green Tech Investments, the project's main investor, had a direct connection to Councilman Richardson, who was actively lobbying for the project on the city council. The breakthrough in the investigation came on the third day, when Jenkins gained access to Luke Harrison's email. Among thousands of work emails, he found a separate chain of encrypted messages between him and Rebecca. Computer crime specialists cracked the code and provided the detective with the complete correspondence, evidence not only of an affair, but also of Luke's knowledge of the corruption scheme. "I can't sign these documents," Luke wrote in one of his last messages. "It's a direct violation of building codes. If the building collapses, I'll have lives on my conscience." Rebecca's response was cold and businesslike. "You have no choice. Too many people are invested in this project. Think about your treatment. Think about your future." These messages, dated a week before Luke's death, painted a clear picture. The architect had been drawn into a corruption scheme, but in the last days of his life, he had decided to get out of the game, despite the threats. The second important discovery was the surveillance footage from the Azure restaurant, where Rebecca and Luke often met. In one of the recordings, Rebecca handed Luke an envelope, which he took with obvious reluctance. Pursuing this line of investigation, Jenkins requested Rebecca Foster's bank statements. The results exceeded expectations: a series of unexplained large cash deposits coinciding with key stages in the approval of the Portland Revival Project. The source of these funds appeared to be a shell company associated with Green Tech Investments. Jenkins now had a working theory. Luke Garrison, realizing the extent of corruption in the project, had decided to opt out of the scheme and possibly expose it. His sudden death from natural causes became suspicious in this context. Marianne, having obtained evidence of corruption, became a dangerous witness who had to be eliminated. But more direct evidence was needed to bring charges. Jenkins decided to dig deeper into Rebecca Foster's past. Requests to other jurisdictions yielded an unexpected result. Under a different name, she had appeared in an investigation into a corruption scandal in Seattle 3 years earlier. The case had been closed due to lack of evidence, but the methods seemed familiar: bribing officials, forging documents, pressuring key witnesses. The question of the flash drive remained open. If Samantha was right, and Marianne really did have evidence of corruption, then its disappearance confirmed a motive for murder that went beyond simple robbery. Jenkins met with Samantha Crawford again, this time at her restaurant. "Could Marianne have made copies of these documents?" asked the detective, watching the woman's reaction. Samantha thought for a moment. She was very methodical. She always made backup copies of important files. Where would she have kept them? In her office. She had a safe behind a painting. Classic, I know, but she thought it was secure. After obtaining a search warrant for the Garrison's home, Jenkins did indeed find a safe in Marianne's office, hidden behind a Monet reproduction. Inside, among the documents and family valuables, was a small black flash drive. The data on the drive turned out to be a time bomb, detailed financial schemes showing how millions of dollars from the Portland Revival Project budget were being diverted through shell companies into the pockets of high-ranking officials and businessmen. Documents with Luke's forged signatures approving the replacement of high-quality building materials with cheap alternatives, putting future residents and visitors to the complex at risk. Emails proving pressure on inspectors and auditors. But the most valuable piece of evidence was an audio recording made by Luke shortly before his death. In it, Rebecca openly talked about Plan B in case Luke decided to leave the scheme. An accident? A sudden deterioration in health? There are always ways to solve the problem. With this evidence, Jenkins obtained an arrest warrant for Rebecca Foster on suspicion of first-degree murder of Marianne Garrison and possible involvement in the death of Luke Garrison. The investigation into corruption in the Portland Revival Project turned into a separate case involving the highest echelons of the city administration. However, when the police arrived at Rebecca's apartment, they found that she had flown the coop. Airport cameras recorded her boarding a flight to Mexico the day before the warrant was issued. An international manhunt began for the woman who turned an ambitious architectural project into a deadly game of power, money, and deception. 3 weeks after the murder of Marianne Garrison, Detective Jenkins' investigation hit an unexpected snag. Mexican authorities reported that Rebecca Foster had left the country with a fake passport, presumably heading for South America. An international arrest warrant was issued through Interpol, but Rebecca's trail had been lost somewhere on the vast continent. Jenkins was sitting in his office, surrounded by photographs of victims and suspects, when he received a call from the lab. The new results of the forensic examination of Luke Garrison's body made him frown. Traces of a rare toxin causing symptoms similar to a stroke were found in the architect's blood. The death, which had appeared natural, was now officially classified as murder. The second discovery was the results of the analysis of fingerprints from a flash drive found in Marianne's safe. In addition to the expected fingerprints of Luke and Marianne, experts found a partial fingerprint belonging to Samantha Crawford. Jenkins tapped his pen thoughtfully on the table. If Samantha had touched the drive, it meant she knew more about its contents than she was admitting. This required further questioning. At Islands, Samantha's new Polynesian restaurant, the detective watched her as she gave orders to the staff. Her confident movements and calm voice gave no indication that she had recently lost a close friend. However, people experience grief in different ways. Detective Jenkins, how can I help you? Samantha approached his table, a professional smile on her face that did not reach her eyes. Jenkins placed a transparent bag with a flash drive on the table. Your fingerprints are on this device, Miss Crawford. Would you like to explain? Samantha's face froze for a moment. Then she slowly sank into the chair opposite him. Marianne showed me some documents, the day before the funeral. And you didn't think to mention this during your first interview? I was afraid. There were names, amounts, people capable of murder. What exactly did you see? Documents about the substitution of building materials, invoices to offshore companies, and photographs. Rebecca and Councilman Richardson in compromising situations. Marianne said Luke was collecting dirt as insurance. Did you know about Marianne's plans for the day of the funeral? She wanted to talk to Rebecca first, to offer a deal, the documents in exchange for the whole truth about Luke's death. She suspected that his stroke was not accidental. This information forced Jenkins to rethink the chronology of events. Marianne was not a random victim. She had consciously entered into a dangerous game with the killer. The investigation took a new turn when an analysis of Samantha's phone calls revealed lengthy conversations with Jason Morrow, a young engineer from Luke's team who was the first to discover irregularities in the project. Jenkins immediately arranged for both of them to be followed. After 2 days of surveillance, detectives recorded a meeting between Samantha and Jason at a remote motel on the outskirts of Portland. Instead of the alleged romance, they discovered a secret hideout where Jason had been hiding for the past few weeks, fearing for his life. Luke's laptop was also stored there, containing encrypted copies of all the documents related to the corruption scheme. Luke gave it to me the day before he died, Jason explained during questioning. He said it was insurance. If anything happened to him, I was supposed to pass the information on to the FBI. But when I found out about his death, and then about Marianne's murder, I panicked. And Samantha? What was her role? She found me. She said Marianne had talked about evidence of corruption. We decided to work together. Decrypting the data from the laptop provided the investigation with the missing pieces of the puzzle. Luke Garrison documented every step of the corruption scheme, from Rebecca's first hints about speeding up the approval process to direct threats when he decided to get out of the game. Particularly valuable was a hidden audio recording of a meeting between Rebecca, Richardson's advisor, and a representative of Green Tech Investments, where they discussed ways to solve the garrison problem. At the same time, the lab provided an analysis of the bullets extracted from Marianne's body. Ballistic analysis linked the weapon to another unsolved murder. 2 years ago in Seattle, an investigative journalist who was looking into corruption in the construction industry was shot dead. At that time, Rebecca Foster, under a different name, was working for the Seattle City Administration. The breakthrough in the search for Rebecca came unexpectedly. Analysis of intercepted emails revealed a pattern. Every few days, she used an encrypted VPN channel to communicate with a financial advisor in Zurich. Through the Swiss authorities, Jenkins gained access to CCTV footage from the bank where the advisor met with clients. One of the recordings clearly showed Rebecca. Her appearance had been altered, but she was recognizable to special facial recognition software. Swiss police detained Rebecca on her next visit to the bank. During her extradition to the US, she remained ice-cold, refusing to comment and demanding a lawyer. The final picture of what happened emerged during the trial. The Portland Revival Project was originally conceived as a scheme to launder money and embezzle public funds. Luke Garrison was brought in because of his impeccable reputation, which provided cover for the fraud. His affair with Rebecca became a tool of manipulation and then blackmail when Luke began to resist. Upon discovering irregularities in the construction materials, Luke realized the scale of the fraud and the potential threat to the lives of the complex's future residents. His decision to leave the scheme and contact law enforcement signed his death warrant. Rebecca, acting on the instructions of her high-ranking patrons, arranged for his murder to be disguised as a natural death. Marianne, having obtained evidence of the crimes, became a dangerous witness. Her attempt to use the documents as leverage proved to be a fatal mistake. Rebecca never intended to negotiate. The murder at the funeral was cold-bloodedly planned to simultaneously eliminate the witness and create the impression of a random robbery. In a closed court session, Rebecca, realizing the hopelessness of her situation, agreed to a deal with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony led to the arrest of Richardson's advisor and the management of Green Tech Investments. The corruption investigation expanded, affecting the highest echelons of the city administration of Portland and other cities. For her cooperation with the investigation, Rebecca received a 25-year prison sentence instead of life imprisonment or the death penalty. At the last court hearing, she remained impassive, showing emotion only once, when the judge mentioned Luke Garrison's name. "He could have changed everything," she said, almost in a whisper. "But he chose the wrong side." 6 months after the trial ended, Detective Jenkins stood on the construction site of the former Portland Renaissance Project. Now, a memorial park named after Luke and Mariana Garrison was being built here. A public space designed by young architects based on Luke's original sketches found in his archives. Samantha Crawford, who received public recognition for her assistance with the investigation, opened a new restaurant on the first floor of a renovated historic building at the park entrance. A portion of the profits went to a fund supporting investigative journalism on corruption in the construction industry. Jason Morrow headed a new independent commission to oversee Portland's construction projects, ensuring transparency and compliance with all safety regulations. Councilor Richardson and others involved in the corruption scheme received long prison sentences. The investigation uncovered similar schemes in other cities, triggering a wave of anti-corruption proceedings across the country. Jenkins often returned to this case, analyzing the chain of events that led to the tragedy. The Garrison story served as a reminder that dark secrets can lurk behind impeccable facades, and that the price of truth can sometimes be exorbitantly high. In a cold cell in the Oregon State Women's Prison, Rebecca Foster methodically recorded her memories, following the advice of a lawyer working on her appeal. The true motives behind her actions may never be fully known. Was she a cold-blooded killer or a pawn in someone else's game? A victim of circumstances or a calculating manipulator? The answers to these questions now mattered only to her and to the story she continued to rewrite even behind bars.